Recording in progress.
Hey, I'll call the meeting to order. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amy, if you'd take roll, please.
Commissioner Dibdahl?
Here.
Commissioner Cronin? Here. Commissioner Wire?
Here.
Commissioner Shaw?
Here.
Mr. Mayor Lindsay?
Here. You have before you the agenda for this evening.
Motion to approve as presented.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. You have before you the consent calendar. Is there anything anyone wants to discuss on the consent calendar? If not, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve consent calendar.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Seeing no unfinished business, on to new business. Approve permanent drainage easement with the South Dakota Board of Regents. Jameson or Ryan, whichever one wants to address this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a standard drainage easement that the city would issue for Dakota State University or for the Board of Regents. This is required for drainage from their athletic facility, which goes across Division Avenue and then all the way over to the creek, which is by Jerry Maloney Park. And so this last property that this easement is for Jerry Maloney Park, which is of city ownership. This is drainage that we do not expect to be flowing all the time, but only in cases of larger rain events. Ryan, anything to add?
Nope, nothing to add.
Okay. I'll stand by for
The one
questions.
thing I think that I would throw in there to add is that this here does have metered water. So, I mean, it's not like it's going to be flooding the creek in a heavy rain event. It will be metered in so that no more goes down through the creek than would normally have without this. So that the public is aware that this is not going to necessarily add to flooding and that in a rain event. So, any other comments?
Is that via retention pond or how?
This is the drainage from the retention ponds. Other questions? If not, do we have a motion?
Make a motion to approve the permanent drainage easement with the South Dakota Board of Regents.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Number 8, authorize the mayor to sign the City of Madison ARPA projects, segments 2 through 6, engineering services agreement, amendment 1 with Banner and Associates. And again, Jameson or Ryan?
Go ahead, Ryan.
Okay, so this amendment is to modify the engineering contract that we signed with Banner dated November 7th of 2022. That was for both project and design and bid services and then construction observation services for those ARPA or SRF segment 2 through 6 projects. Banner's requesting to restructure the contract limiting fees by reducing the design and bid services contract limiting fee and increasing the construction services by the same amount of $130,462.32. This results in no value change to the contract. It's just simply moving money from one to the other, so that total amount of the agreement remains the same.
Okay. Questions or comments? If not, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Number 9, review of open meetings law and conflicts of interest. Jameson, do you want to address this?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think we might be the first city, I would guess, that would be complying with a new law that was just passed by the legislature. So Governor Roden recently signed Senate Bill 74, and this requires review of all open meeting laws by municipalities and other subdivisions of the state. This is not something that goes into effect yet. Likely it'll be after July 1, but it's something that both the Municipal League as well as the City of Madison supported and felt positive towards the passage of that bill. So since we are supportive of that, we thought there's no time like the president's to place on the agenda a review of open meeting laws and conflicts of interest. I think the commission here knows that I'm somebody that's passionate about open meeting laws and making sure that we follow all the laws, not just to the law, but also in the spirit of the law. And so generally, if anything, we're going above and beyond our open meeting laws to make sure that our meetings are accessible to the public and we can receive engagement and input and also put out information via those meetings. For example, tonight's meeting is the first meeting that we are broadcasting via Facebook Live. That's not something we had done before, but we've seen other cities do that, and we wanted to make sure that we are making our meetings as accessible and open to the public. So that's a new thing that we are doing, and we plan to continue to do. So I'll go over open meeting laws, and then also I placed on here a review of our conflict of interest policy. Both of these topics are in our recently created City Commission Policies and Procedures document, and I felt that was a good time to review both of them, even though the latter is not required by the new Senate bill. So open meeting law. What is it? It's simply the principle that the public is entitled to a seat at the table. We want to make sure that all of our public bodies are open to the public, that they can see the decision-making process going live. So as our elected officials are hearing information, debating it, all that is information and debate that is open to the public. And the public is not only able to listen to that, but also partake in that and ask questions and then give their input to the process as well. So meetings, what constitutes a meeting? That's a pretty broad definition in South Dakota law over what constitutes a meeting. Of course, our regular meetings or special meetings like we have for regular meeting tonight is a meeting that falls underneath open meeting law. This also includes any Zoom or teleconference meetings, so if all 5 of the elected officials need to meet via teleconference or via Zoom, that is something that falls under open meeting law. It also includes emails. As I think some of our members here know, we're very strict on elected officials cannot email out to a quorum of the others. So you can email one person, but you can't email 2 people, because between the 3 of you, that constitutes a quorum, which falls underneath open meeting law. So all discussion of the city commission always takes place during these open meetings. If there were a time where an email was sent out amongst more than 2 of you, something we would look to recommend you to disclose to the public to comply with the open meeting law. We also follow this carefully so that if a quorum of members are expected to be at the same location whenever possible, we are posting a notice of quorum. Sometimes maybe there'll be another government entity or an event in town that we know that you'll be at, especially if it's of public interest. We try to post a notice of quorum. If you find yourself in a situation where you happen to be at the same basketball game, we just encourage you not to sit next to each other and not to be discussing city business. Open meeting law applies to voting members. In our case, our mayor and our 4 elected officials. It does not apply to staff. It's just for elected officials. This does mean that city staff can send correspondence to the commission, just like any member of the public can do so. Anyone at any time can get all 5 of your email addresses and send you an email, and staff are not exempt from that. We have that same privilege. And again, as I mentioned, mayors and commissioners cannot send correspondence to the rest of the group. There are situations where you can close a meeting to speak privately. We refer to this executive session. State law and statute 1-25-2 lists the purposes that are eligible for executive session. These are specific purposes, specific topics. It's not something that you can move to executive session for any reason. And there are about 6 things that are listed under there. I won't go through each of them in detail. Within the agenda packet and the memo, I did have that section from statute listed in full. In general, the ones that we use most are to discuss employee qualifications and performance. That does not cover contractors, that is employees and potential employees. We also use it for consulting with legal counsel on contractual or litigation, and then also for preparing for holding union negotiations. there are situations where we could use this for any of these, of the 6 purposes there, but those are by and large the 3 that we use most with the city of Madison. I'll emphasize that no action can be taken in executive session. This allows for discussion, for information sharing, but not for action. And so anytime we are in executive session, if action is needed, we need to come out of executive session to take that action. However, I'll note that that is very rare as well, because we still have to have those items listed on the agenda. So if there's a situation where we think action might be needed, we would list that specifically in the agenda after executive session. And most cases, since I've been here, I believe we have that executive session for discussion purposes and no action is needed, and no action is taken that night. If there's a violation of open meeting law, if somebody makes a mistake, if we miss something, we can do our best to try to make that up to the public, and that generally means disclosing communication. So for example, if an email was sent out from one elected official to the whole body, we could disclose that email and put it on the next agenda so that the public is aware of that communication that was been made and make it a public document. Any questions on open meeting law? I'll note for the public that I think the elected officials here would agree whenever they're in executive session, I do my best to keep them on track, and it's not a hard job. They know the law, they keep to that. But if ever there's a situation where the topic is moving off of what's covering the executive session, we do a good job of getting it back to the topic so that we stick to the law and we stick to the intent of the open meeting laws. Okay. Conflict of interest. I think this is especially important for any small town, which is the bulk of South Dakota. It's really difficult to find individuals to serve on elected bodies, boards, commissions, committees, whatever the case is, who don't have some kind of conflict of interest. It's one of the best things about our communities, and it's one of the challenges when it comes to making sure that we are being fair in our conflict of interest policy. So conflict of interest occurs when a member of a voting body deciding on an item where he or she may receive a benefit or a harm, so a positive or a negative in some way. Statute has 4 different types of conflicts of interest, which we'll go over, but I'll emphasize that often these conflicts are very common. There is ways to work through them. Just because a person may have a conflict of interest on one topic doesn't mean that they are ineligible to serve on that body. It just means that they need to make sure that they are aware of that conflict and disclose it accordingly. The 4 types, there's 2 different kinds of pecuniary and personal interests, and then we have direct and indirect, so they kind of split into a 2x2 quadrant. Direct pecuniary interest is a matter where the voting member is benefiting or being harmed in a direct financial way, either financially or through property. So this is if the elected official has something financially to gain or lose. This is the most significant and is a conflict of interest that requires you to withdraw yourself from that decision, which I'll get into in a little bit. The second type is indirect pecuniary interest. So this is an interest that is still financially related in some way, but it doesn't impact the elected official directly. It could be tied to somebody who is a close family member or an employer. So indirect, but financially related to that individual. The other 2 are personal interests, so they're not financial related. Direct personal interest is if the member is voting on something that benefits themselves or a blood relative or a close friend in a matter of great importance, but again, non-financially. And then indirect personal interest is where you're voting on something that is tied to your membership in an organization. So it's not financially driven, but it does impact an organization that you are part of. With this one in particular, I'll note that a number of you, all of you are on some boards and committees on behalf of the city, and personally I always view your role on those as city first. So when we're voting on items for the chamber, for example, just because you're sitting in the chamber board, I don't view that as an indirect personal interest because you are sitting on that board as a city employee, as a representative of the city. Now, if you're sitting on a board that does not have any personal ties to the city, then you would need to consider whether you're having an indirect personal conflict of interest in that case. So those are the 4 types of conflicts of interest. If you have a conflict, you should state it to the board on the record before any discussion or action is required. And this allows all parties to be aware of that conflict, that it exists, and make an objection if needed. After you disclose it, if you have a direct pecuniary conflict, that's the first one I mentioned, you are automatically disqualified from voting, and that's found in State Statute 6117. For all other types, the other three types of conflict, you are not automatically disqualified. Members can decide for yourselves whether you want to sit out or abstain from that item. If you choose to, you are disqualified. It's treated just like the direct pecuniary. If you do not believe that you are biased enough that you need to abstain from that item, you may proceed with discussion and voting. And there is a caveat that if the rest of the board disagrees with your conclusion, they think that you should be disqualified, then they can have a vote which requires a 2/3 vote to disqualify that member for that particular conflict of interest. And when I say disqualify, I should note that it's disqualifying them from that particular item. It's not from the whole meeting. It's certainly not from their position in office. It's just from that one item. If you have disqualified yourself voluntarily, or if the board has voted that you need to be disqualified, you can still speak to the item. You can still voice your opinion, but it should be done in a personal capacity. I would recommend, in this case, physically removing yourself from this side of the podium and going over to the audience side where you can speak as a member of the public. Just because you are an elected official, just because you might have a conflict of interest, does not mean that you give up the rights that any other citizen has. You may still speak your mind and speak to a piece, but you need to do so in a private manner. When the item is over, I'd say that's an appropriate time, then you can return to your seat. Okay, that is a fairly in-depth overview of both open meeting law and conflict of interest. Are there any questions?
And I would say, if there are any questions from the public, you're free to contact Jameson during business hours.
This is something that we'll be reviewing annually with the passage of the new law, at least the open meeting law portion. And again, all of the information I covered today is available on our website through our agenda packet today, and much of it is also found in our commission policies and procedures, which were approved in 2024. Thank you.
Questions or comments?
No, I thank you, Jameson, for that. I think it's important that people understand that we really work hard to follow open meeting laws here, and I think we really do a good job of it personally, so.
Other comments? Okay, thank you, and I agree with what Adam said, and we will move on to number 10, February 2025 finance updates, and I'll ask Jameson and Amy to lead us through this.
Several notes for this month. January update is to include year-end details for 2024. Work has started on our digital budget book through ClearGov. We have the QR code for police parking tickets is fully operational at this time. A note for the 2026-25 year-end financials will not be provided until February of 2026. The Finance Department accepts invoices for the prior year through January 15th. Additional activity also comes in impacting the previous year. So just something I've gained knowledge on moving forward out of this year being my first time in this season. Next year, I'd like to move that to February just to give more time for those transactions to come through. One other note that is not printed here, on February 28th, the Finance Office will be open till 5 p.m. For people to file election petitions. That's the deadline on that date. So from last meeting, I have a couple 2024 revenue adjustments to note. The Fund 101 General has a $603,000 adjustment. The Fund 211 Lodging and Entertainment Tax has a $2,157.12 adjustment. Fund 213, which is the second cent sales tax, has a $50,102.41 adjustment. The Fund 517 Creek Walls has a $559,315.91 from FEMA. Fund 602, which is water, has an $801,320 from SRF. And Fund 604, which is sewer, has a $96,330 from SRF. And those are December revenues that were received in January. We will be posted back to the 2024 year. Long-term debt in the amount of $1,315,801 was not issued. And then the biggest piece and the most variable that you will see that came in is transfers in the amount of $13,836,039 have not been posted. We are waiting for the 2023 audit findings before proceeding to negate unnecessary entries as recommended by the auditors. So once we have those results back, we can post those in, and we'll see those percent numbers fluctuate into the 100%. That explains the spreadsheet that was also included in your guys' packet, and you'll see that those percentages line out to bring you really into those 100% ranges that you guys had questions on. The big one the one with the over expenditure would have been the City Hall building, that being, we completed construction in 2024, not 2025. So that was the big moving piece on that. Did you
Right.
have?
Yeah, I'll note, especially the transfers. So when you looked at the financial statements from last month and you're wondering how are we only 60% through budget, those transfers in particular affect both sides of things, because if it's a transfer out of one fund, it's gonna be coming across as expenditure, into the fund is obviously revenue. So that big, large amount that was planned and is waiting on that audit would bring those numbers a lot closer to the fully budgeted estimates for the year.
Correct. So then we'll move into January numbers. General cash on hand is 13.2 million. Investments, 5.89 million. Checking, 6.34 million. Money market, 686,000. Other, 286,000. And in restricted cash, we have 624,000.
And you're comfortable with that at the moment?
I am. I'm very comfortable. I think a lot of things have settled down, and we've worked through a lot of different things. We've got funding in place for creek walls, so things are moving along efficiently.
Good.
We have our revenue guidelines.
I'll note as you look through the revenues and expenditures, and we've discussed with the finance office how these numbers often seem skewed because of the percentage of the budget for some of the reasons we discussed a couple slides ago. We're going to try to look at ways this year where we can make these numbers more impactful or more revealing for our current financial situation. And we're still brainstorming what those ideas will look like. But as for now, you can consider us, this is January numbers, so 8% of the way through the year. And these are fairly close to those numbers, considering we often have quiet winters where less activity is happening than in the summers.
Any questions on the revenue? Expenditures?
I got a quick question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I know I've asked you this in the past, but, we got our cost of service study, that's depending on that 2023 audit, as well as a few other things, the potential capacity contract. Do we have any ballpark idea of when we can expect that to be completed?
So you're asking a timeline for the electric rate study?
No,
the
timeline of the
2023
2023 audit, because the
Okay,
rate
which impacts
study
rate study?
is yes.
Yes, we've asked the auditors if they have a timeline. They haven't given us anything specific. Our hope is that sometime by mid-March to end of March that we will receive it back. But that's not a timeline that we've received from the auditors. That's what we are anticipating ourselves. Does that help at all?
Yeah, that helps. It just seems like we got a lot of additional items that are contingent on that audit, so.
Yeah, you're right. And Amy, remind me, the auditors were on site, was it beginning of January? That sound right?
Correct.
So we expect it to take 2 months, give or take, but we don't know. It depends on their workload and the things that they have going on. I will say that this, from what finance has communicated, this review for the audit for 23 went a lot smoother and a lot quicker than the 22 audit, since our staff just went through the 22 audit and they're more familiar with the different reports and documents that they're needing to provide.
The other thing is right now through April 15th is tax time, so it depends on what their workload is in relationship to that as well.
Is Shane Fish doing our audit again?
Yes. And we're hopeful that we get it before tax season, but they have not committed to any timeline.
Does that answer your question, Kelly?
Yeah, it does. I still think we need to press them to try to get something finite as far as a date.
Okay,
I can reach out again.
okay.
Thank you.
By fund for January?
The electric fund there, what's the negative expenses there?
I would have to look to see which exactly they are. But I can get back to you with that, Troy.
I'm assuming just a 24 item. Rolling over, I guess I'm not even sure.
We'll have to get back to you.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
fine.
not, I don't want to misspeak on that.
Nope,
so,
that's fine.
Yeah. I'm gonna check one. I don't have it on this one, so. And year-to-date.
Same numbers, yeah.
Yeah. And then sales tax, for January, we are at 11.60 increase for $526,287.
Certainly positive sales tax numbers to start the year in January, exactly what we'd like to see, especially looking at a lot of the other larger cities had significant decreases for the month of January. I can always venture guesses why, but in the end, it's just really difficult to predict where those sales tax numbers go.
That's actually really good, I think, for where we're at.
That wraps up that. Any questions?
What did we budget for snowfall removal for the year, do you know,
I don't know off the top of my head, for 2025.
for this winter, yeah?
Yeah, I can get back to you on that.
I'd just be curious to know. 24, 25, yeah.
Yeah, with
We
snow
did a
budget,
bunch of it, which is nice.
right?
We
Yeah.
did, yes.
We always have 2 seasons for snow budget with each budget year, so we might have a very positive variance in the spring that could be wiped out in the fall, early
Totally
winter
get it,
too.
yep, totally get it.
Yeah.
So
We've
now
gone-
that
we-
11% that showed up for January offsets the negative 11% from December, it looks like.
Correct.
So some of that may have been in December, just get carried over to the state for January, maybe? Not got
It's-
paid in
yeah.
December.
Yeah, possibly.
Some of it, it's just hard to say. I mean,
Yeah.
you're looking
Yep.
at the entire local economy, and some things come in early, some comes late, sometimes there's corrections, sometimes it's just a good month, sometimes it's just a bad month.
All right. I assume we don't have any public comment? Okay. Under announcements, the next regular commission meeting will be Monday, March 3rd, 2025 at 5:30 PM. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
See you, Kelly.
Thank you, everyone. All right. Very good.
You stay warm out there, Zach.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm. Agreed on that one.
warmer.
Well, it felt like we got totally teased, like at the end of January.
Yeah.
It was like 40, 50, like.
It's coming back this